Damien, can you introduce yourself?
Aleksander, thanks for inviting me, and I'm looking forward to the interesting conversation. Yeah, I work as a CTO at DevX. DevX is a website for international development or international aid. They've been around for a long time. They are still owned by the original founders. They never got any external funding. And I've been there now for 8 years. They invited me at a time when they had some problems in the company with the previous tech team, and they needed my expertise to improve the situation a bit.
Fantastic. And that's the experience I'd like to talk to you about, because it's certainly a challenge in itself to enter a company where somebody else was leading in the past, or perhaps there wasn't any technical leadership, and then essentially to become familiar with what it is, and then to change it in some ways. So can you tell us a little bit more about that? So let me first start with the role of a CTO. What does a CTO do really, and what are the general goals of the CTO?
Yeah, obviously it depends really on the company. It can be anything from someone calling him as founder, CTO, when he's still one of just two people in the team, up to really big companies, or some companies even have multiple CTOs. It really depends on the situation. I think when we talk of the normal CTO role, it's someone leading the technical side of a company, which often includes not only the technical direction, but also leading the team, building the team, hiring, and so everything that's involved, so that the rest of the company can focus on the other side of the business.
Got it. So let's narrow down a little bit. We're not going to talk about startups today. We're going to talk about companies that are established, perhaps scale-ups. So in your mind, a medium to large company, what is that? And can you tell us a little bit more about the size of DevX when you joined it? How large was it in terms of headcount in particular?
So I think we were about 100 people, maybe a little bit more, 120 maybe. The tech team was also relatively large compared to the company size, maybe 50 people, 40, 50 people. They were all located in our Philippine office in Manila. But yeah, I live in Barcelona, so I joined here with just one or two other developers that were already here, and the idea was that I take charge of the whole team. And yeah, I would say a medium-sized company, and in my mind is up to 150, 250 people, maybe, where it's still nearly possible to know most of the people. And then, yeah, with larger company, I don't have much experience. The largest company I worked on was maybe 500 people.
That's great. Actually, I think most people who have the ambition to become a CTO are probably going to become a CTO of a company of that kind of size. And I think this is a very interesting subject because it will appeal to so many people. So can I ask you to tell us a little bit more about your experience there? So when you joined it, what was the first thing you noticed? And that perhaps something positive, something negative, something you thought needed changing, or maybe something that surprised you positively about it?
The first thing I noticed was that there was like a very clear separation between the business side and the technology side, and also a lack of trust from the original founders toward the tech side. While they were happy with most of the products that the tech side produced, with the website and the backend and the backend administration, they couldn't relate the amount of money they spent on it with the output, and also the time from when they asked for a feature to when it was delivered. There was no transparency, like not even a guesstimate when it would happen. They basically said, oh yeah, we would like to have this feature. And then they were happy enough when it was appearing maybe a year later. So this was, I think, the main problem, the lack of transparency. into this team. While most of the other teams were well known by the founders, this was kind of a black box where they didn't know what was happening.
Okay, got it. Fantastic. So a number of interesting challenges there. We have a question from Sunil on the chat. Did you have development background or infrastructure background? What was your background, Christof, before you joined as the CTO?
Well, I really come from a developer background. I like very early in my career, I had a startup with a friend, and we grew this. Well, he employed me because I was a developer, and we grew this in a bigger size. And at some point, I kind of had to take the role of manager for the engineering team. I was very inexperienced. I probably made many mistakes. At some point, I have to ask my former colleagues about this. But yeah, I think this brought me into management. While before, I always was very skeptic about it. But at that point, I saw that you're really a multiplier. And if you're a good manager and people like engineers respect you, you can really achieve something good. And that's what I'm trying to achieve also at DevX.
Okay, fantastic. So let me now go back to the your initial days at DevX. So you mentioned lack of trust. So can you tell us a little bit more about that? So how did it, in a sense, manifest itself? And then we're gonna go to solutions. What you did about that?
Yeah, I think that's how it was brought to myself. And then when I looked at it, there was no transparency of any roadmap or even any estimate that was happening. The engineering team had a very large part of QA, which was doing manual QA, and they had also like people who are interested in agile and trying to spread this in the team, but it was really not visible in any way. They did some of the routines and some of the ceremonies, but there was no artifacts that came out of it. And I think that went through the whole engineering side. So a lot of things were very manual on the deployment from the infrastructure side, and everything required a lot of work from people. And it was a rather large team, which was surprising because the website didn't seem that complicated. And we had some developers, as I said, in Barcelona, and yeah, I was going along with them very well and trying to figure out what was going on. Also traveled to Manila a few times to sit with the local team, and also trying to identify who are the key people there, who are the ones that really shine, or like the good engineers or the good managers, to identify how with which people I can go forward and really produce something worthwhile.
Got it. I'd like to go back a little bit to your very first few days. What did you do first? Like, did you make a speech? Who did you speak to? And maybe how did you really start building the relationship with the people there?
I think, yeah, I mean, I did some introductions obviously to the Barcelona team and to leadership, and also remotely to the Philippine team. I wanted mostly present myself as someone who first wants to learn what was going on, and not try to put my views from my experience from previous companies directly into use to this company, because it might not fit. They might have completely different uses and applications, how they do their work, and how they might be really good. I wanted to learn about this first, and also figure out, yeah, who are the people in the company, not only in the engineering team, but also outside the team, obviously upwards to the leadership, but also on the product side, left and right, to see which are the key people I probably have to work with, and learn from them. So I think that's also my recommendation whenever you start a new job. Like, first learn everything. You probably accumulate a long list of things you hate, and and you want to change, and then after maybe maybe 2 months, you go back to this list and probably cross out a lot of them because you say, oh, okay, now I understand why they do this. This is not, it's not a silly idea. It's just something that I didn't understand the first days I arrived here. But then there will be still a lot of things left over that you might want to change later.
Got it. I love what you said, that you presented yourself as someone who wants to learn, and that certain things initially may seem like they are silly, but then after 2 months, maybe you need to cross out from them from the list of things that seemed silly initially. And I think that's very important advice. So I wanted then to ask you about your first and maybe what did you do after those first 2 months? So I understand this, the learning process initially, meeting the people, learning from them. How did you choose the first challenge to solve, and how did you basically prioritize of all the different things you mentioned? You mentioned trust, the manual steps, the bloat, the difficulties in how the pipeline was structured. How did you choose your first priority?
So yeah, there were a couple of things. So as I mentioned, for example, on the infrastructure side, it was very manual. That's something I wanted definitely to address. And I wanted to increase the transparency, not only outside, but also inside the team. A lot of people basically worked alone without talking to other developers. So the first things I introduced was code reviews via GitHub, which they're already using, but it was not really used with code reviews. I started process. Well, my idea was I have to give the whole team something to go forward to that seems like an interesting project, which also will bring the technology and the communication forward and bring the whole team together. And my idea was, okay, we're going to do continuous deployment, which in the mind of the people who were there was like, okay, this is impossible. We can never do this because at the moment we do everything by hand. But this was not my goal for the first year, or for not even a realistic goal in the near future. But it was something that we could strive for, and by having this goal, everybody felt, okay, this is something I can also take part in. Like the QA obviously said, okay, we have to automate QA because otherwise this is never going to work. Then infrastructure said, okay, we have to do this, and the developer said, yeah, we don't have any unit tests. This is probably a silly idea to do continuous deployment if we don't have any unit tests. So they said, how can we improve the code that we trust our code to go live all the time? And this was like a lot of different pieces to bring together. And then on the project management side, I also tried to find out, yeah, okay, they were trying to use agile already. They were trying to use Scrum in some way. And yeah, what are the main points, how to improve this to make it possible to use it for team learning, and what are the good things they were already doing and which ones could maybe improved in different ways. And I'm a bit, even if you don't do agile or Scrum or anything, I'm a big fan of retrospectives also to learn for the whole team. And that was also a learning experience for me, because then I'm mostly used retrospective in Europe and Western culture. And then when I approach this in the Philippines team, where I have a very different approach to communicating things they don't like. There were definitely some hurdles there. Because they don't like to say openly, okay, this is not working. It's just not what you usually do in the Philippines. So there was also like some culture learning on my side, definitely.
Okay, you've opened up a lot of very interesting subjects here. Just on that note, just wanted to ask you, can you tell everyone what your background is? Because you're originally from Germany, right?
Yeah, I'm from Germany. I went to computer science university in Germany. Broke that off because someone offered me a job in an early internet company in London, and this was 95. So I thought, okay, this is probably going to be the future. So I started a job there. which then turned into the startup I mentioned earlier. And at some point, I decided, okay, this is like the startup is too much work. It was also not going well with the startup, and after the .com crash. So I decided, oh, I need to go somewhere where life is a little bit easier and take a normal 9-to-5 job, which brought me to Barcelona. And I've been stuck since then in Barcelona because it's a nice place.
I wanted to stop you there. Yeah, this is actually really good to know, because you also experienced that cultural change there. And I think it was interesting that you said there about the difficulties introducing Scrum in the context of different cultures. So let me just give you a more general question on that note. So when you started introducing those changes, so it was the GitHub reviews and the Scrum retrospectives, right? What sort of resistance you face? You already kind of mentioned the cultural resistance. What other points of resistance did you face, and how did you overcome them?
I think because it's something new and people generally resist new things, there was some resistance from the developers or even QA. Like people in QA, they saw that their jobs probably going to be replaced by automation. The leadership was worried when I said, okay, like every code is from now on going to be reviewed by 2 other people, and said, okay, this is like 3 times the work for the same output. So there was some resistance from all sides, and but yeah, by being very transparent myself and explaining, oh, these are the reasons why I do it, and let's just try it and see where we're going. I think with that approach, I also maybe opened up some other people who said like, okay, I want to, okay, this is the way I want to work, and I want to. They mentioned it maybe in the retrospective. Okay, this is not going wrong, right, and or I hate retrospectives or something like that. But yeah, just getting to conversations going. Well, previously it was a bit like everybody was working alone and not really as a team. And I try to bring them together.
Got it. So this is very interesting. I wanted to ask you a little bit more about it, because you mentioned those QA people that perhaps were worried that automation would deprive them of their job. And you also mentioned that there were a lot of people working for the company, more than you would expect from what the website actually was. So did you actually have to let someone go, or did you, or not? And if so, then how did that go? Did you do it right away at some point? How did you explain that? Can you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, it happened a bit quicker than I would have liked, because I was, as I said, I was still trying to identify who are the people who I want to keep. But my boss and one of the founders decided, okay, we really have to cut this down, and I think some of the QA people were probably right that their jobs were on the line. And so it was massively decreased, the amount of people we had in the Philippines. And at the same time, we started building up the team in Barcelona. There was also some leadership in the Philippines who were not agreeing with most of my decisions. So they also at some point they left the company. I think this is also important. Like once you have defined the direction and you have most people on board, you have to identify the people who are just against everything in every meeting and so on, and then figure out, okay, what are you going to do about them? And often, if it's not the right fit, you have to take the decision that it's probably not going to work out.
Okay, this is a very important subject. So as all of that is taking place, so you introduce those changes to QA, introduce those changes to how development team works. How do you communicate all that to your bosses, to the C-level team, to gain their trust that you're doing the right thing?
Yeah, one thing also, which was not very common at DevX when I arrived, was one-on-one conversations with your reports or your boss. So this is also something I basically pretended, okay, this is what you do. and told my boss, we're having every week we have the one-on-one conversations now, and the same with my team. And that was the one direction. And I also traveled to Washington D.C., where we have the headquarters and where most of the founders are, and gave presentations to them, and also try to bring across, okay, I'm very transparent now. There was this one situation where I gave the presentation and I showed them our Jira backlog, which was very long. And I told them, you see everything below line 50, we're never going to do this. I mean, you asked for it at some point, we're never going to do it. That's just how it is, because you come up with new ideas all the time. This is just not going to happen. And they all looked at me like like I took away Christmas, because they expected, okay, if they asked for something and it's on the list, it's probably going to happen. But it's just not realistic. And by bringing this across and silencing the room for a while, I think they also realized, okay, he's probably going to tell us the truth about the situations that are going to happen. And I think that this is an anecdote which is, I think, still repeated in the company sometimes.
Okay, got it. So of all these things that you started changing, was there one that was particularly difficult to change? Something that seemed like wasn't working, like maybe the resistance was highest, or something that took most or longest to change?
Yeah, the hardest part is probably related to the business side, because, as I said, it's an old company. It's now 20 years old. When I arrived, they already went to writing everything in Java and then rewriting everything internally again. And they also accumulated a lot of products. I think we have 16 or 20 different products, different sized, obviously. And it was hard, like with a small team, basically you were switching contexts between the products all the time. And from very early, I said, either we reduce the number of products that we have and increase therefore the quality and the time we spend on the product, or we have to figure out another way. And just recently, in the last years, I think this finally took an effect on the decisions of the founders. And we now really, this year, we only focus on 2 products for the whole year, and probably for the coming years too. And we already killed a couple of products or sold them off to other companies. But this is obviously something that is very hard to change, especially if you're just on the engineering side. They don't expect you to come and say, okay, this is not going to work if we have so many things to do. And it took a while to change, and I often was very close on giving up and said, okay, I'm just happy when engineering work. I keep in my bubble and they keep in there. But I think it's just not my way. I try to keep bring the business and the engineering side closer together.
Okay, got it. Right. So we had kind of interesting challenges. You kind of remind me of Steve Jobs now, because he also, I think, when he returned to Apple, I think after a while he cut the number of products, and kind of interesting decision that you made there, or actually you influenced the business side to make the decision. So actually, let's talk about it a little bit more. So the relationship between business and engineering. So you said it was really, let's say, untransparent, opaque, right? So you didn't have there wasn't transparency what the engineering was doing. How did you change that relationship?
From very early on, I found some good product owners who then worked more closely with the stakeholders, also identifying the right stakeholders, which at the beginning, because we have many products, were many stakeholders. And then trying to figure out what is really needed, because they all had their long wish lists, and then identifying priorities. There was a lot of discussion around this, but by making all of this very open and publishing all the results we have internally in documents, to everyone, not only the relevant people, but really to the whole company. I try to create this transparency, and everything we did in our team, the demos or all the artifacts that we have, I try to publish as wide as possible. So obviously we have the internal Slack, but we also created internal blog where we on the engineering side always publish what we're doing, demos or technical decisions and so on. And I'm not saying everybody's looking at it, but everybody can look at it, and people are certainly aware that where they can find it.
Okay, that's an interesting one. Can you tell us a little bit more about it? Because who writes that blog? Is it the leaders or is it engineers themselves? How does it get maintained?
Both. For example, if I write beginning of the year my plans, my vision and my strategy for the year, I would write it in an internal blog post. Infrastructure team, for example, writes if they make a big change to the infrastructure side. We moved at some point, well, in the beginning from scripts to automated EC2 deployments, and then now to Kubernetes. And when they said, okay, this is what we're going to change and why we're changing it and how it affects the rest of the team and maybe the company, they write it like a long form blog post about it. This is completely optional, but it really helps with the conversation. And sometimes it's also just small decisions where one engineer says, okay, I tried to address this problem and I found this kind of solution and I looked at these other solutions. So he writes a document around this.
Got it. Great. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to change the view to gallery, and I encourage everyone to participate. If you would like to speak and raise your hand, you can also just unmute yourself and ask a question. But I just got a very interesting question from Sunil in the chat, which is about all the laptops, servers, patching, computer support, phones, HR and finance systems, information security, basically non-software development side of CTO work. What are your thoughts on this? What did you see there? And what is your responsibility around it? Actually, could you also clarify to everyone, what did you see and what did you do about this area?
Yeah, I'm only, in most of the decisions I'm not directly involved, and the setup was, and probably is still messy. So we have a separate IT department who deals with some of the internal systems, but they also got reduced a lot. So we mostly use like services now. And yeah, probably the worst bit is the security on our laptops, but that's just how it is. And I try just to deal with the situation in the engineering department, because the other thing is completely out of my control.
Okay.
Christof, I guess that question came from me. So the infrastructure part of the organization reports to somebody else that does not fall under you as the CTO?
The infrastructure side, so servers and everything that runs our code, basically, that falls under my part. But like the personal laptops, for example, for other departments, that's separate from me. And there's certainly some security issues there sometimes. Okay. But yeah, we don't have like a central place. Basically, everybody maintains their own laptop, and then we have some security recommendations for how they use them.
When typically, I was thinking that would all fall under the CTO umbrella. Is that something that you pushed out, or is that how it was in your organization?
I think it really depends on the company. Sometimes they have a separate IT systems department. I mean, we are so small that it's not worth having this. And we are also so small that I can't have dedicated people or manager dealing with this issue, and I can't deal with it personally either. So this is currently just distributed. I imagine if we grow just a little bit bigger to maybe 200 people, 250 people, then it becomes a bigger issue, and there's probably a better structure around this.
And the final part of my question, what about HR and finance systems? Is that not something that you would own? Like, let's say you have a Workday implementation or some other implementation. Is that something that you own as a CTO? And again, this is like non-dev, right? This is more configuration and maintenance. Just kind of curious how you've dealt with it.
I think for most of these systems we use like SaaS products, so they're completely made, and all configuration there is the user management that is usually handled by the department that is using these products. That's at least how it works for the HR department and the finance departments. They're using online products where I can't even do much about them except maybe user management.
From a strategy perspective, you don't want to be part of those initial discussions. I mean, there might be Workday versus something on Salesforce, or maybe there's another competing offer. Would you not want to own it as a CTO because it's increasing technology risk for the technology within the company, right?
Well, as I said, also with my ideas about product, I have a lot of things that I have an opinion about, but I also have a priority list. I know the things that are more important for me and higher impact to the company that I can achieve. There are some things that touch my area. For example, our website. Registrations on a website are directly synced to Salesforce, and payments are with the payment provider. And where we have these kind of connections, then obviously I try to influence decisions, and we have also some work on integrations with them. But if something is completely separate and doesn't touch the products that we create in the engineering team, I try to keep my hands out of it. I have my opinions, but I keep them to myself.
Okay, got it. I have an interesting question from Christina. What was your previous title when you took your first CTO role?
So I can't even remember. I think I was just programmer Christof or something. It was something. I didn't really have a title, and then later I think it got changed to technical director. Because it was like a company with German roots, and they didn't even have CTO titles at that time. But in fact, I was the CTO. Yeah, that's how it grew then. But it changes, and afterwards I went back to programming for a while and was a developer again. And then when I like changed to other companies, architect, and then again a director and CTO.
Okay, got it. Christina is also asking, how is your job different than the VP of engineering? So is there a VP of engineering at DevX?
No. Well, I think everybody defines them a bit different. I would define that the CTO, if there's a CTO and a VP of engineering, the CTO is maybe more focused on the technical direction, maybe about integrations with other systems and decisions. Okay, do we do Kubernetes? Do we change to React? Whatever, like this kind of technical decisions. While the VP of engineering is more thinking about the processes, how the teams are set up, communication with the team. I like to give the example of maybe a startup where, like myself, you were the developer and you really liked programming, you liked the technology, you liked maybe the infrastructure side and all of this. But then you grow and grow, and then suddenly you have to deal with people, but maybe you're not the person to deal with people. I definitely wasn't the person to deal with people. And then you hire a VP of engineering to deal with the people side. That's what I would have looked like at that time, but yeah, we couldn't find someone. And that's how I would describe them. But I talked to other CTOs where it was exactly the other way around. There, the VP of engineering was dealing with the technology and the CTO was dealing with the people. So it really depends on the company. It might be different for every single company.
Got it. Ingo is asking, what was the hardest thing you had to learn turning from an engineering role to a management role?
I think the delay between making a decision and the result. So as a developer, it's brilliant. You write a little bit of piece of code, you run it, the test runs, you push it to production, ta-da, ready. Okay, maybe it takes a couple of hours to do it, but it will be quite fast. But if I now make a decision on the management side, I talk to someone in the one-on-one because I realized, okay, something is going wrong. Then I can't. Usually, I don't tell them. I try to influence or I give direction to how it might go better. And then the next one-on-one, it's probably still the same, but nothing has changed. And like a couple of weeks later, it's still the same. It moves very slow. And you really have to look back over the last quarter or last year and see, okay, it got better, like everything got a little bit better, and I had some influence, but like you don't have this direct influence that you make a decision and the next day something is different. It just takes a very long time.
Got it. Yeah, that's an interesting one. I once heard an anecdote. It was from one of US presidents. I can't remember who that was, but he was asked, what is it like to be the president? And he said something like, you sit in a chair, you bark orders at people and nothing happens. Yeah, so yeah, I guess that's the role of leaders. Right, so if I don't see any further questions, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into breakout rooms. By the way, this has been a great discussion. I really like this. I really appreciated you showing up and telling us this story.